perfect reflection of God. The words may seem simple enough, reflection of God, and perfect as well. But this is the mystery that you may accept that you are the reflection of God, that you must accept to be in truth. But what you are accepting is the unknown. You can try to imagine what becomes of you when you accept that you are the reflection of God, what that reflection is. You can't know the reflection without opening that divine communion and letting God show you what it is to be the reflection of perfection. There's no sense in trying to use the mind of the temporary to try to conjure that up. And the beauty of that not knowing is that no one knows until they come home. So everyone's together. There's no there's no one who knows a little bit more or a little bit less about the reflection. And that becomes the place of wonderful humility and union, even before the union is realized. But it opens the door to the realization that no one in the journey to remember is actually more advanced than anyone else because there is no linear, there is no time. So the idea of being advanced can't really exist. There's no degrees, there are no degrees of and levels of anything. So there's nothing to be advanced of. The beauty of that realization is that you can surrender and rest because there's no one to compete with, there's no one to beat out, there's no one to show up, and there's no one to pity as having less. So it's just that coming together of awareness that we don't know anything and how delicious that truly is. That the divine universe, the universe of perfection, carries all wisdom. And in that wisdom, there's nothing that we need to know unless it is a moment of that communication for some purpose. But it's really resting in the not knowing. resting and resting and resting. Resting because the hard work that everybody has put in trying to be better than or more than or ahead of or whatever it is can be let go, and rest can become the dearest friend. Just resting in love. Reflection of God. The one thing that you can hold on to with the reflection of God is that you can rest because there is nothing but perfection in God. There are no wrongdoings, and all the ideas of mistakes are simply a blip of error and doesn't change anything. How many hours would you think that you have spent in this lifetime with guilt or shame or deflection, trying to get rid of it, and all for nothing because it means nothing? No one has changed the truth of love's perfection and love's reflection. Nothing. Surrendering everything into the hands of God that stands in the way. Over the mountains of despair, we will rise above. Over the heartache and the pain, upon the wings of love. The healing of our savage heart, gently by the dove, miraculously transforming us upon the wings of love. Terrible mistakes we think we've made, regrets we've undergone. Sometimes the hopelessness makes us forget the sun at dawn. All delight and joyousness, the tender mercies of Jesus, who carries our burdens upon the wings of love. Jesus, who carries our burdens upon the wings of love. Upon the wings of love. It's truly meant to be a teaching that, again, in healing, there is no true understanding of what occurs when there is healing. And the need to know, which happens a lot with ego, the need to know what happens when there is healing. What is it for to know? That is always the question. What is it, what's it going to do if I know this? If I understand it? If I get it? Does it change anything? Not really. Because the the emphasis is really that if you knew what was occurring, which would be impossible with the mind, the brain of the ego, because it only knows minutiae, so there's no enlarging of the scope of what can be understood. As soon as you think you know something, you can bet that you don't. It's almost like a game that the spirit of love plays. Like, look at this, think you know what it is, and then it disappears and becomes something else. The main purpose of not knowing is to be able to shed the ego structure. And the ego structure holds on tightly, rigidly. You can feel the rigidity of it. It comes with the rules, it comes with knowing, and it comes with being um, nervous or scared that you don't know. That place inside that really thinks that you should know because that's the rules. But your mission, your purpose is to unravel all of the identity that's been made that has no reality. And the most efficient, for lack of a better term, way is through not knowing. Because everything that is known has to be dropped anyways. And how can you know and trust at the same time? It's not possible. Trust is faith. The faith is resting in God without evidence. There is no evidence that is necessary or needed or real. Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes you don't get a sense of that you're walking with your guides, you're walking, you're surrounded, you're being helped. But as soon as you try to enter into that, to get more information about it, it just falls away because there's a need to get, and love cannot join or be part of getting. There's nothing in love that can get. So it's takes you back every time, and then you can begin again in the not knowing. Upon the wings of love. The words themselves are poetic, but if you let that that poetry upon the wings of love, Jesus who carries our burdens upon the wings of love, that doesn't fit into anything. You can't say, oh yeah, it's kind of like my Uncle Henry. He had wings of something and carried burdens through his wings. No, no. Wings of love. Unseen, but there, trusted in, surrendering to, and trusting. Always trusting. The return. My soul wants to fly away when your presence calls it so sweetly. My soul wants to take flight when you whisper, arise. A fish wants to dive from dry land into the ocean when it hears the roaring waves, and a falcon wants to return from the forest to the king's wrist when it hears the drum beating return. A Sufi shimmering with light, I want to dance like a sunbeam when darkness surrounds. O God, you are the graceful and the pure beauty of life. You are the truth of love. You are the giver of life. What misery and hardship comes to those who turn away from you? Not because there is a penalty, but because without the vibration of love within, we suffer. We always suffer. Oh, bird, fly back to your native land. You have broken free from your cage, and your wings are eager for flight. Fly from the back brackish puddle toward the flowing waters of life. Leave the room where they put the dirty sandals and return to the royal seat of the soul. Be off, be off, O soul. Leave behind the world of separation. That is everyone's purpose. And come into the world of union. How long will you play in this dusty world? Like a child filling his shirt with worthless stones. Behold the countless ways this body has entrapped you. Break its deadly hold. Rise up, lift your head clear of this delusion. God said to the mind, return from where you came. Leave this world behind. Grab hold of all that is love and take the treasure of love in your heart and cast away the burdens of this earth and fly upward toward heaven. Put away your childish cares and join the royal banquet and cry no more. The return. Why does it take so long to return in time? You could return this minute. Everyone could return this minute, except you can't take your mind with you. You do really have to come empty, empty of everything that's been made up, because how can it come with you when it has no truth? It has to be shed. The most wonderful place of learning is when you recognize the insanity. Not, it sometimes happens that because of projection, the insanity of the world can be recognized much more quickly than the insanity within the mind. And projection encourages that. You can shake your head looking at the world, looking at others' behaviors or the rules of the world, and you can shake your head and say, well, Yeah, that's insane. And all that it does is keep you from turning within, because eventually that's the only place there is, within. And it's not because you don't see the spirit of all life, but because truly all life is already within you. There's nothing outside, really, of your truth, your heart, your perfection, because there is no you that holds that the entire universe is within. If there's no you, how do you hold the entire universe? You don't, because there's nothing to have to hold on to. When you surrender into the hands of God, you're stripping yourself of all the habits, all the ideas that you thought you knew how to put together a day, a life, whatever it is. And all that love is calling you to is to surrender day to day, everything. But mostly it's just truly resting in the not knowing, just resting in the not knowing. What makes that so difficult? And it is seemingly difficult. The addiction to thought is mind boggling. Imagine that you could walk through the day and be free of thought, be the day. You're not separate from the day. And it's not held together in anything of time or ideas. But to be without those ideas is to make room for that divine communication that whispers. And the whispering is purposeful because without the quiet, without you becoming quiet, the, the mind, the brain just stays active in its chatter and distracts. How many times a day do you think you look for problems, situations? There's a way of looking at the world. It's kind of like being a scout. You know how they used to have scouts for the armies when they were on horses, and the scouts would go out and check things out, tell you if it's safe or not. The mind is a scout like that. It scouts out the situation, scouts out the relationships, scouts out circumstance, scouts out likes and dislikes. It's scouting without anybody really realizing that the mind is out scouting. What is the scouting for? Well, it's basically the same thing as going out on the horse and looking to see if there's danger. because the belief in danger is held as one of the most real elements. The idea that you are a body and that you can die, that someone could have a thought about you that is unkind, that seems to be a danger. Every thought of the ego is built on danger, and it's in that constant looking for to see if you can avoid the danger is a it's almost a full-time job. There's not much time left for resting in God because it's looking for the danger. How do you recognize danger? Everybody recognizes it the same way, all based on the past. Every every beloved has their story, their belief system, their defense system. And it's used constantly to try to stay safe. The you may think that someone who is able to have a scout and yet stay fairly socially acceptable, you're just sitting there. Nobody knows that you're scouting. So it puts you in a better space than someone who is scouting and gets very shook up by the scouting because they're afraid of who's thinking what and what's happening and all the fears. Is there a difference between those two beloveds, one that's showing fear and one that's able to hold a better persona? Absolutely not. It's all the same. The beloved who is actually holding the persona of okayness is actually possibly more entrenched than the beloved who is outwardly anxious. Don't know which one is more entrenched. That's part of the not knowing. Your your evidence doesn't work. The evidence of the world has to be let go because it's a form that you've made that's familiar, and you have been able to decide whether something is a problem, unsafe, dangerous, whatever words are used for it. But everything on the outside that you are afraid of or concerned about or hooked into as far as a need for defense, all of it is made up, completely made up. And that's the blessing. It's made up. At first, it's when you hear the words it's made up, it's almost insulting because you've done such a good job of making a world that you think you know what needs to be defended. But when you really take those words in, I made this up. I made it up. It may be the first time you can actually breathe because to acknowledge you're making something up is actually the what opens the door to the divine? Because once you recognize you're making it up, then you can actually change the trajectory of going out and finding problems out there when all of it is in the mind. And now you can actually surrender all the thoughts of defense, all the ideas of stories or battles or all of it becomes just, I made this up. And if I made it up, then I can choose for it to be healed. If it's outside, I have no jurisdiction. Of the millions of beloveds who are all in fear, they're not my enemies. I made that up. I made up every single thought I had of differences, of levels, of degrees, of situations, good, bad, all made up. And that's where the resting is. So when God calls you to rest in love, it has a very important purpose. It's calling you to discover what resting really is. Because there is really no resting in the world when you believe that there are things outside that are dangerous and that you can die. So coming home to resting in God is shutting out for just a minute your beliefs about the world being dangerous. And when you rest in God, it's a precursor to where you will come home. Coming home is resting in God. Because you have no more thoughts that disturb. You see them for what they are. You see them as the distractions that they are. You see them as the entire belief system that scarcity is real. When you believe that scarcity is real, and we have all believed that scarcity is real, or we wouldn't have incarnated. When you believe scarcity is real, you believe that you have to fight for love, that you have to fight to prove your worth of love because there isn't enough. Because only the better ones make it to the top. There is no top. There is no better ones. It's the realization that there is only love. And you're making everything else up. As you walk in the everyday, let that be your mantra. I'm making it up. And everything that you look at, just look at it as if you were there to make something up and see it in that, just that moment. There, almost every spiritual truth path carries many teachings that are identical, which is very reassuring that they all go in the same direction. And one of them is You're only here to clean your own porch. You're only here to sweep your own porch. So every time you think of someone else and what's wrong with them, what's what bothers you, come back in that moment. If you're bothered, it's your own thoughts. That's all that it is. If you have an opinion, it's just a thought about yourself. And all the bothers and the irritations that seem to arise are irritations and bothers that you've had about yourself because they have no place else to come from. May not have been exactly the same in this lifetime, but it's guaranteed that if something is bothering you, it's because it's a belief you have about yourself. I think I used an example the other day of if someone was yelling and you were reading a book or talking, and you got upset. That's so rude. They're disturbing me. It's hitting my nerves. That's the moment. That's the healing moment when you look at your irritation, look at your disturbance. It's not unfamiliar. It's going to be very familiar. As soon as you are willing to recognize that you're carrying an irritation or an upset, all you have to do is ask, how familiar is this? It's always familiar. And it's always from the past. And it's always from either something that you believe was done to you, or that you did, or that you believed in, or you saw, or whatever. But it's from your own mind. And imagine the freedom of no longer having reaction to something outside you. It can be anything. If you're at a red light and the car behind you honks when the light turns green because you can't move your foot that fast to the other pedal, and everything in you wants to turn around and say, I'm doing the best I can, or something like that, it's all in your own mind. Nothing actually happened except that you believed that somebody was being rude to you or disrespectful or just unkind. But one way or the other, they upset you. They disturbed you. No, they didn't. They never did. And that is the strength of truth, is that it's all in your mind. You will become free from your own mind, because that is the prison. To no longer be at the effect of anything outside, and to be free from the thoughts that you made that built your identity. That's what you're healing, is all the ideas that you think you know about the world, about what's right, what's wrong, what's irritating, what's not irritating, how somebody should behave, how somebody shouldn't behave. there would never be a need for socially acceptable skills if you were connected to kindness within your heart. If the first thought is, this kind, what is this for? It's easy to get caught in the one who's yelling, but what is the irritation for within? What is it that's wanting to be made right? Can it really be healed with your intention? Yes, absolutely. And that's how it will heal. But first, there has to be the awareness and acceptance that there's nothing outside. Period, full stop, nothing outside. Once you accept that there is nothing outside, I am the ruler of this kingdom. Sometimes it seems that it rules me, but when I give it to the Holy Spirit, I am making the choice of where these thoughts and what thoughts are going to be acceptable. You are the ruler of your mind and your heart. And there is nothing outside your mind that has any reality for you. How much time do you believe is spent on thinking about others, thinking about what others do, what they say, how they behave, what you like about it, what you don't like about it? None of it has any value. None of it. It can't, because it's made up. And that's the most delicious place. I made it up. Because for the first time in your incarnation of how many ever lifetimes that may have been, you will be at the door of complete love, because you will be able to surrender your mind's beliefs into the hands of God, because you know you made it up. It has nothing to do with anybody else. There's no yes, but for anyone. Doesn't matter who it is, what the situation was. Everyone has the stories in their lives that as soon as you say, you know how they use the term dog whistles for certain derogatory statements? Well, you have dog whistles in your brain. There's dog whistles that every time you hear a certain word, it triggers your belief in the past. And as soon as it's like right there, the whole story, chapter, verse, a whole book, it's right there, because you carry it. And you many times carry it to prove you're right. Let me let me tell you. Let me tell you what it was. It was nothing. We made it up. But those dog whistles those words that trigger you, sweep them out the door, put them out for the trash, and forgive yourself for believing that you were in battle or that someone had wronged you. It's it's where all the pain comes from, and it has no truth. Your freedom is your mind, the mind that is given back to God, free of all addiction, free of all stories, free of all habits. It touches everything. Probably 10 years ago, I started a poker game, and I taught everybody how to play Texas Hold'em. And we played with pennies that I kept in a jar. But the most amazing thing, because that poker game had a specific purpose, and it I said what the purpose was to be able to see your attachment to winning, your attachment to losing, your attachment to being right, your competitiveness, whatever it was, or you're sulking because you didn't win. And what did it mean? Because this is just a poker game. Multiply that by 10,000 different situations. It's the relinquishment of all of the idea that you could win or lose. But what ends up being when you are willing to surrender all of those ideas of winning, losing, doing better, being smarter, whatever it holds for you, you can't actually be there enjoying this poker game, this connection, this place of communication when you're wanting to win. Because in the moment, in this perfect moment, you are in a union of love. And to not have an attachment to winning or losing frees you to actually be in union and be grateful to be playing with beloveds without any expectation. But also not having any expectations of anybody else's behavior, because while you're busy wanting to win, the the mind is filled with irritation because you want to win. So then when somebody coughs, that's going to be an irritation, or somebody blows their nose, laughs too loud, whatever it is, there is an irritation already built in. And consciously, that can be all let go. If you come to the game wanting to enjoy the blessings of holy union, it's there. It isn't there in winning and losing. Everything has that opportunity in it. Everything. Every situation, every moment. I made it up. And when I am joyous in the realization that I made it up, I come closer and closer and closer to being in peace. And that is the blessing of coming home. Peace and love with everyone.